Hi everyone, this is Teresa Coenen with Stitch and Tree Quilts, and we're going to get started with our Marti Michelle quilt along. This is our first time that we're doing this webinar live with you folks, and so we're going to go ahead through some of the basics of making sure that you know how to get logged in and you know if you are able to get your voice and your audio. So right now I see that I have Arlene and somebody else. And I appreciate you guys have joined us online. We'll also be recording this for people who are wanting to watch it later from home. So for Arlene and for other folks that are on, wave at me if you can hear me. Arlene, can you hear me? Good, good. All righty. You'll notice this is all done through Zoom video. So sometimes you'll see me looking down, and that's because I'm looking at my computer screen and clicking on different things. So I'm going to have you take a look at your screen, and you will see that there is a place where you can call up a chat. It's at the lower bottom part of your screen. I'm going to share my screen so you can see where that's at. All right. I can't show you what I see on my end, but you should be able to see at the bottom end that there is a chat box. It looks like a bubble, like a quotation bubble, like we would have seen in the cartoons years ago. And in that chat box, questions or comments along the way, you can type them into the chat box. Like, for example, I'm typing, "Hello, everyone." And I've just sent that to chat. If you have questions as we proceed through our session today, go ahead and send them on the chat. You can send them individually to me, or you can send them specifically to anyone who's on the chat at the time. And I'm going to go ahead and send a message to one person specifically. And we'll see if she gets that message. Wave at me if you just got a message from me. You'll also see at the lower left-hand corner of your screen, there is a microphone. And right now, it's pressed to mute so that I can't hear you. And that's in the event that we have several people who are participating. We want to make sure that we don't have a lot of background noise or a lot of feedback. If at any time you're going to chime in and you want to say something, you just click on your microphone and it will unmute. In this first session, we'll be going over just the basics and the introduction of the Marti Michelle 9-patch parade. So there won't be a lot of time to interact. But by the time we get to our next session, there will be opportunities for us to do show and tell, where I'll call for people to show us some images that they are doing, or show the quilts that they're putting together, or show images of what they've done, or ask questions if they have questions about a particular pattern. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get moved on. I appreciate that everybody has joined us. I want to thank also Angie Wilson. She's also known as Gnome Angel. She is the one that is leading the quilt along for Marti Michelle. Now, Marti Michelle is an Iowa girl, and I just absolutely love her. She lives in Atlanta now, but she started here in Iowa with the rest of us Iowans. So I've been doing Marti products for quite some time. I was really tickled when Marti said she was going to come out with this odd size 9-patch, because we had a particular quilter who'd been in our Marti club who'd been kind of hounding Marti for years. When are you going to come out with a 9-patch ruler so I can make 4-inch squares 9 patches? And Marti's been doing 9 patches for a long time, but the thought had never really occurred to her, what do I do about those weird sizes? What do I do about numbers that don't divide evenly by 3? A 3-inch 9-patch is easy. A 6-inch 9-patch is easy. A 9-inch 9-patch is easy. But what do you want to do if you want a 2-inch 9-patch, a 5-inch 9-patch, a 7, an 8? And so our friend Cindy Jensen got Marti thinking about this long and hard. And about a year ago, she told me she was coming up with these odd size rulers. So to participate from Marti Michelle 9-patch parade. You need one basic package. You need a package that looks like this, which is the package with all 6 patterns and an introduction, and the first 2 rulers, which is a 3-inch and a 4-inch. You can do essentially something from each one of the months of quilts, which will have 6 of those, with just this 3 or 4-inch. In the event that you want a different size 9-inch square, you can purchase this bonus pack that has the 2, the 4.5, the 5. It has several different sizes in this that you might want to use to match up squares. For example, if you were going to use the square tool here and you wanted to match it up to maybe some orphan blocks you had, say your orphan blocks are cut 7 inches, cut 7, you're going to want to use the 7-inch 9-patch to go with that. So just to remind, I'm shooting this live. If you are struggling and you can't get logged in, don't call our shop because I won't be able to answer the phone while I'm online. Just know that when we finish, we'll go ahead and we'll create a video of what we've done. We're recording live right now, and we'll go ahead and we'll post that up on our Facebook page, our website, our Instagram, our Twitter. All you'll have to do is log in any one of those places and you'll be able to get the information that you might have missed. It's also going to be helpful for you to be able to come back to later as you're constructing your quilt so that you will know that you can come back and look at any parts that we've done and review them as you need to. All righty, we're going to go ahead and get started. In this particular webinar today, we're going to spend a lot of time on the introduction. Last week, Gnome Angel, Angie Wilson, introduced from Australia, which is where she is conducting her quilt salon, is in Australia. She introduced the beginning and told people to begin looking at their fabrics. We're not going to jump into looking at her fabrics yet. I'm going to go over Marti's introduction package. Now, they're seasoned quilters, and we think, oh, shoot, I don't need to read the introduction. And we might even be people who are accustomed to using Marti Michelle tools and templates. And we think, I don't need to read the introduction. I'm going to tell you, we need to read the introduction. So we're going to go over that today. We'll spend part of our time on it today and then a little bit of time on fabric selection. And you guys will get to go on the very first pattern that she has. Oftentimes when I am working with a new pattern, or working with a pattern I think I'm going to use multiple times, and Marti's patterns are like that, I'll make a photocopy of the pattern, which is legal for me to do because I've purchased the pattern, and I'll actually write my notes on the pattern. Now, the other tool I like to use if I'm not going to make a photocopy of the pattern is I like to use sticky notes. Or the number one tool, of course, is just using a pencil. Use a pencil, and from that, you can determine, what it is that you want to make note of for the future. So go ahead and grab your introduction and follow along with me, if you will, please. On the first page, it's just a nice picture of the introduction. I probably should also apologize too. We're pretty informal here. Got a camera on a stand, got my design wall behind me. It's not the most formal way of recording, but it works for us. And for those that come and follow along when I'm in the shop, those guys know that my intentions are always better. Sometimes I make it look like the Blair Witch Project because I jump around a little bit. On this second page, it's just what a description is of a 9-patch. And you can read through that at greater length. You'll notice that she'll describe different ways to make a 9-patch. Where I really want you to start paying attention and making notes for yourself is when you take a look at the part that it says on page 2, the part here that says think ahead. In this case, when she's telling you here regarding your 9-patch blocks, you need to remember to think ahead. When you're cutting your fabric, she wants you to cut your equal size strips, which we'll review in a little bit. But when you think ahead and you put your 2 strips together with right sides together, like this piece is, when I cut them at the same time, they are exactly the same size, and I know they're going to piece together perfectly. So what she's encouraging us to do, what Marti's encouraging us to do, is to be planful and think. Rather than cut my white fabric here and then my gray fabric there, I just put my white and my gray fabrics together, went ahead and cut them as one strip. Makes it a lot easier for piecing. I'll let you read the rest of page 2 on your own time. And on the bottom of page 2 and the beginning of page 3, Marti starts to describe the cutting method. For those of you, I see Miss Grace is on and Cindy is on. For those of you who have participated in our Marti clubs before, you've learned a more effective and efficient way of cutting. So I'm going to demonstrate this here, but kind of keep in mind that I'm upright, so it's always not so easy to do. First of all, let me find my tool. All right, so this happens to be the 3-inch out of the packet, out of that basic packet. Now these are different than Marti's other templates. Marti's other templates are white with purple lines on them. And to be honest, they're easy to lose because they're clear. I said white, but I meant clear. Because they're clear, when you lay them down on the table or on your fabric, sometimes you can't see them. Or in this case, when I have purple fabric, I don't see the lines very good. So using a lot of feedback from consumers over the years, Marti has gone to this yellow template. Okay, so instead of using your rotary mat or your ruler to cut, that's not as accurate as using your template to cut. And here's why. When we use the lines on our mat, over time, our mat changes shape or size. And if you don't believe me, take your ruler, lay it on your map and see it on your mat and see if all your inches are still inches. Because I'm going to guess the place that you cut the most frequently, say along the 9-inch line, those lines have changed. The groove of your cutter has changed those lines over time. So what Marti directs us first to do is to lay our fabric down, and you'll look at the right or left-hand side of her instructions, and you are going to square the fabric up. You're going to square it up using the lines on your ruler, not the lines on your mat. So you can see here, I purposefully have made my fabric crooked on the mat so that you can see that this mat has nothing to do with how I'm going to measure. The mat is only there to make sure I don't cut through my fabric and into a table. My mat is just there for cutting purposes. So in this case, I've already squared up my fabric and I am ready to go ahead and make my cut. What Marti has taught us is that you place your ruler and you line it up, your template, you place your template and you line it up along the edge of your straightened fabric. It's extremely hard to do face up. You need to get one of those overhead cameras. Okay, so once I have placed my ruler, my template on that edge, I slide it down and I check my width again. And I keep doing that and I butt my ruler right up against it. And when I know that I am perfectly square with that piece of fabric, I take the template away, I make my rotary cut. If you go to Marti Michelle's website, she has some really good videos regarding how to do that. By using that method to cut, you'll make sure that that strip that you're cutting is exactly the width of your template, and that's what you want. Hang on, I dropped my template. So by cutting that fabric exactly the width of the template, instead of placing the template on a ruler and trying to see how many inches the template, just use your template to define how wide you're cutting your strips. And we'll talk later about how many strips you need. That's later in her instructions, but that's the basics of how to do that. Again, you put your template along the edge of the fabric and you move your ruler in next to the template to make sure that it's a straight cut. You cut there and that's the piece that you need. Remember, Marti talked about making your cuts in such a way that you have right sides together. I see in from my chat that Some folks are having a hard time hearing that maybe there's a delay. I don't know if that's on your end or my end. It could be because of the number of people who are participating. So what I would say is that make sure if you're having a hard time with the delay, when we do the recording, you won't see a delay. All right, let's move on back to the pattern. As Marty describes on page 4, once you've made those first cuts and you've done your piecing, you're going to be making second cuts. And I'm going to go over that further. I'm just right now going through the introduction and telling you some things to consider before you begin actually piecing your quilt together. On page 5, Marty talks about chain piecing, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And she'll talk about, right down here in the bottom corner, she has a tip. If you have to rip, she tells you just to pop off every 6 or 7 stitches on one side and pull your thread through the other. I will tell you, I often do maybe 3 or 4 stitches, depending on my stitch length. Keep in mind that the tighter your stitch length, the harder it is to rip out. So that's something to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that in the event that you are sewing with a fabric and a thread, they're the exact same color, that makes it difficult to rip out. So I like to use a neutral thread, and I use a neutral thread on almost everything I do. As long as my tension is set correctly in my machine, it won't make a difference. All right, here on page 6, she has some more tips on making sure you know how to stitch a 1/4 inch seam. Again, that's so important when we're quilting, is to make sure our 1/4 inch is truly a 1/4 inch. And I'll talk about some pressing and some thread choices that will help you make sure your 1/4 inch is a 1/4 inch. If you have a 1/4 inch foot, you still need to measure your 1/4 inch after stitching and pressing, because sometimes our 1/4 inch feet are not exact. Sometimes we might need to move our needle position over 1 or 1/2 a needle position, whether that's left or right. But I will also say that a 9 patch is very forgiving, because the number of seams vertical is the same as the number of seams horizontal. However, if your 1/4 inch isn't a true 1/4 inch, when you go to apply the Marti template to square up your block, it's not going to fit quite right, and you're going to have a hard time figuring out which lines to line up. So make sure that your 1/4 inch is a true 1/4 inch, and do that with some practice strips she tells you here. She also describes some bonuses in the ruler. If you're wanting to fussy cut small pieces in your blocks, and I'll show you an example later, then you're able to fussy cut that on the ruler because there's an area to do that. If you're wanting to use this whole size as a fussy cut, like this would be a 3-inch fussy cut piece, you can use the ruler for that. So that's her bonus number 1 and her bonus number 3. They're kind of the same. They're about fussy cutting, but one tells you about fussy cutting 1/9 of your block, and the other one tells you how you can use this block to center it on any 3-inch square and fussy cut that. So it's a nice use of that. She also, in bonus number 2, tells you which product numbers you can use to get different size blocks. Like if you wanted an 8-inch block, you would use her product 7105. Now here at Spring, we don't stock all the individual block sizes, but if you need one, I'd be happy to order it for you. Or you can go online to Marti Michelle's website and pick that. Or if you want the bonus size, we have those. All right, we're going to keep going on Marti's introduction. We were on page 6. We are going to switch to page 7, where Marti talks about different techniques that will help you with your strip cutting. And I tell you, we used to have a friend that worked in our shop. She lives in Washington, D.C. now. And she was a very precise quilter. She could not understand why some people have so much difficulty with quilting. She said, gosh, if you cut it and you press it right and you sew it right, it comes out right. Well, that might be true, but it's harder for some of us than others. So keep in mind that your thread matters too. Marti says down here in the corner, up at top, she talks about the accuracy of cutting, which we do with all of her templates, but that she says the thread matters too. And I thought it was interesting because I thought, oh gosh, what thread does Marti use? And she says right in her first paragraph to use a quality 100% cotton thread. And back in the day, we used to do a lot of quilting and sewing with Coates and Clark that was a poly blend thread, and that actually introduces more stretch in your block. So 100% cotton thread is going to be better. And Marty says she uses an Aurifil 50 weight. That's exactly what I like to use in the shop. That's what we have on our website. I love to piece with an Aurifil thread. As a 50 weight, it takes up less room in the seam. And so when I piece it at a 1/4 inch and then I press, my thread doesn't take up too much room in my seam. I love to quilt with a 40 weight cotton, say a Gutermann or a signature cotton, but I don't like to piece with a 40 weight cotton because it takes up too much room in my seam and it ends up making my finished blocks a different size than what I intend to. All right, the next part that Marty talks about here is pressing. And she says pressing is not optional. And she's absolutely right. If we press correctly, it's going to come out correct. And so I want you to take note that in the second paragraph, she says, it'd be easier if we could just press all of our 9-patch seams the same direction, but usually we press to the dark. Let me explain what Marty means by that. As I have a strip set put together, it is a lot easier for me to press right down the middle and press my seams to the outside. That's so easy to do, and it'd be nice if in my gray and white strip and my white and gray strip I could do that. But if I did that, my seams are not going to nest. They're not going to settle in closely together, and they're going to end up making some lumps and be off. So when you're pressing, I'm going to give you a tip here that Mark doesn't give you. First of all, I like to set the seam first. So in this case, if I am pressing, and if I chose to press all of my blocks to the dark, or if your fabrics are the same value, just different colors, say you're using a red or blue, make a personal note, make a sticky note. I'm pressing it all to the red. Or in this case, I would say I'm pressing it all to the gray. All right. So when I'm going to do that, I will press, in my case, the light. I'll lay it first on my pressing mat. And I like to use, right by my quilting table, a nice wool pressing mat. It allows me to do the small piece pressing that I want to do. Certainly when you're using a long strip like this, you can go to your iron and press it that way. But if I were pressing this piece, I'd have my light side up, my dark side down. Let me put that up there. You know, I just dropped that, so we're going to go over here. I'd put my light side up, my dark side down. Like it shows here. I like to use a steam fast iron. Now, I had a customer come in last week, and she brought me a steam fast iron that she picked up at a discount store, and it's not quite the same as the quality of a small traveling iron that you can get from a quilt shop. If you're going to use a small traveling iron, make sure that the iron you use has a long cord extension here that keeps you from snapping that cord off. My other instruction for that is, do not wrap the cord around and around the iron because you're going to snap it off here. The gal that stopped in my shop last week told me that when she was doing her ironing, when she was trying to press, she plugged it in one day and caught fire. And she could see that the cord itself, the wires had broken. So keep that in mind. Always check your iron before you start to press. This is what I call setting the seam. The fabric that I'm going to press and want to go towards, I first set the iron on the seam and I set the seam. Then I open it up and press it. Now, a person might want to know, why would you ever do that? Well, by doing that, I'm getting a nice crisp seam. And that's going to make a nice, a nice crisp pressing. That's really key when doing a 9-patch. And let me explain why. With this piece where I have my darks on the outside and my lights on the inside, it's fairly easy for me to run my iron straight up the middle and press to the outside. And then I can take a look at it and pull it apart a little bit and make sure that I didn't underpress any part or miss that seam. And I can do that with this piece. With the piece where I'm pressing to the dark and I have my lights on the outside, that seam is a little more difficult to just run the iron down the middle. And so you literally have to press these seams one at a time and make sure that on your ironing board or on your mat that seam stays straight. You've got to be cautious when you're doing 3 strips that if you just go willy-nilly pressing, they'll get a curve in them because there's some bias related to the grain of the fabric. And Marti talks about that in her cutting instructions. But once you get that curve in it, when you try to apply it to your quilt, you'll see that curve. It'll be obvious. So you want to make sure that that curve is not there. All right, that's it on pressing. I'll talk to you in a little bit about pressing and doing the fanning your seams and turning them open. Now Marti's talking about fabric selection. And typically for a 9-patch, when you're using it in your strips here as sash units and cornerstones, you want to be very cautious about directional fabric. Some directional fabrics will work just fine. So this stripe, if I were to use this, it would work just fine in the quilt because here on the sides of the quilt, it would stripe out. And because we're cutting it that way, it would stripe out. So it would have a good look to it. But let's say I was doing a larger quilt and I was using maybe the 8-patch and I really like this tree fabric. This is not going to look good because when you turn the corner around the blocks, your fabric is going to, sometimes it's going to go one direction and sometimes the other. You don't want that. So be really cautious about selecting your fabrics, particularly if you're using a fabric that is directional. The other thing that Marti cautions us about is to make sure that we stand back and take a look at our fabrics and that they aren't too matchy-matchy. Otherwise, there's not going to be enough contrast to see the 9-patch. All right, I'm off to page 9. And this is where Marti's talking again about cutting and the grain. And Marti likes to make her cuts on the lengthwise grain of fabric. I'm going to come back to my tree here. So she's suggesting we would cut this direction whenever possible. Why? Because there's less bias going that direction than what there is going this direction, and certainly what there is going this direction. When you're looking at your fabrics, your least amount of bias is going to be lengthwise. So you might ask, how long of a piece do I need? Well, it's pretty easy. What size of blocks are you going to be going around? In this particular quilt, and one of the reasons why I like this 9-patch parade, oftentimes you can get a pre-cut, and when you get it home, like this one, it was sweet. I thought, oh, that would be so much fun. I'm going to set those in a quilt. Well, guess what? It's 21 inches across, and it's 20 3/4 inches down. And that's often the case with panels that we buy. That's one of the most frustrating things about working with a panel is the fact that they're usually not square. And when you're trying to do other piecing, it's really hard because you have to go cut your sashings different sizes. You don't have the ability to tune things and move them around. So with this method, it's pretty simple. I can cut 21-inch pieces that match this, and I can cut 20 3/4 here. So when you want to know what length do you need at least the length of your longest side of that block. So she talks here at the bottom of her introduction about why she likes to do her cutting on the lengthwise grain. And then in the next pages, she gives some demonstrations. She talks about why people don't do the lengthwise grain. And I've kind of learned that Marti knows what she's talking about. So the rest of this introduction from pages 12 is just some basic information. And now I'm off to page 13. On page 13, Marti includes a yardage chart for the 9 patch blocks. So it's really important you don't lose track of this introduction, because as she goes through the next 6 months with these quilts, you're going to find that you're going to wish you could rely back on this chart. So notice up here in this corner, when she talks about how many squares do you need. So for example, if I were using it to cornerstone 8 blocks, how many squares do I need? She'll tell you how much fabric you need to make those blocks. So it's important to keep track of that. The rest is a lot of other calculations, bed size, different things. So I'm going to tell you to skip on down to the last page now. And on the last page, Marti describes the ruler. This description is the same whether you're using the 3-inch ruler, the 4, the 4.5, the 5, the 7, the 8. No matter which size of your rulers, these markings are exactly the same on all of the sizes. And so that's really nice. Once you get used to the method once, you only have to learn it one time. As we go through our quilt in the next 6 months, you're not going to have to worry about making a mistake because you don't know how to use the ruler. It's the exact same size. All right. You'll also see that Marti likes to engineer corners. These are engineered so you don't have dog ears. Now in a 9 patch, it's not as important as what it is if we were doing some corners. So if, as we go along, we're going to be introducing some squares and then some half squares, you might want to take the time to engineer the corners off. And she tells you how in the introduction. But I'll be honest, for myself, I chose not to engineer my corners because in a 9 patch, just square units meeting square units. All right, that's everything in the introduction that I want to go over with you. And now we're going to dig into this month's pattern. Again, excuse me while I make sense of my table here. And again, in this particular case, we're going to be doing the 9 patch triple sashings. What I like about Marti's patterns is they're always chock full of ideas. So besides the quilt you will always see on the front, you will see lots of options in Marti's pattern to do other quilts, other ideas, quilts, table runners, bags, pillows. By the time we finish this, you'll have had the opportunity to do about everything. So on the cover photo that she has, she marks that the blocks are 10 inches by 11 inches. That's exactly what I was talking about, how when you get a panel, sometimes the blocks aren't square. So I will give an example. Years ago, my sweet aunt embroidered these blocks on a Robert Kaufman panel. And I loved the idea that Robert Kaufman came out with a quality cotton for embroidery. And I've always wanted to do a red and white quilt. So I asked my aunt, because she's such a good embroiderer, if she would do that. She sent the pieces back. They're to be set on point, okay? But when they come back, they're not even in size. It kind of really ruined what it is I want to do for on point, and it made it very difficult for me because they're 1/8 of an inch off. It made it very difficult for me to determine setting units. So I've set this aside. I truly have had it for probably 5 years now, maybe more. And I'm finally going to be able to do something with it because I'm going to use my Marti method. So that will work much better for me. All right, I'm going to do a little screen share because this particular pattern, we had one eager quilter that once she got her her templates and her first instructions, she dug in and she started going on it and make her own. So I'm going to share my screen. So be patient with me while I get to the next screen, and I will show you what Cindy made. Let's see. All right, you can see this picture. This is Cindy Evans, and she came into our shop because she couldn't wait to show us that she had used the 9-patch ruler to create this sweet little table runner. Has some Easter fabrics and some turquoises. It's just adorable. And so I wanted to show you that this is how it can be used. And I think if I remember right, Cindy told me that this was a fat quarter bundle that she picked up in the store and kind of had for a while and wasn't sure what she was going to do with it. And you'll see that she took the opportunity to size her fabrics so that she had an even size block in between. This will also be a case where they wouldn't have to be even. They could be different sizes. So from that, I'm going to move on to Gnome Angel. If you do Instagram, the Gnome Angel, Angie Wilson, who is from Australia, she has a gabillion Instagram followers, and she's doing her Marti Michelle quilt along from her Instagram account. So when hang on, I'm moving something so I can see how to get there. When you go to her Instagram account, you'll see all of the images. Oh, see, she just posted Cindy to her. I think that's great. And oh, Cindy, you already have 8 likes. So when we do her Instagram account, you'll be able to see different fabrics and choices and her comments related to how she chose the things that she did. So for this particular month, these are some of the images that she has chosen. She chose to use this sweet little orange ducky print. And again, her blocks on the panel were not all the same size, but this one is not, this particular pattern doesn't require that they are. She chose a pile of orphan blocks, and she created a design that would use the orphan blocks. And we all have a pile of blocks that we've just not put together. And now here's an easy way to do that. And here she picked up pretty much a 2 color tone fabric that she is going to put together with this month. So here on her Instagram, it shows the fabrics that she's chosen. I can't wait to see what she does with these garden dots and how she makes them work with the pattern that we have. I really love that she's doing a lot of these things and experimenting for us. It makes it a lot easier for us as we go along. If somebody experiments and makes mistakes first and then makes it easier for us. Let's see. And this is one of the other quilt shops. This one is in Germany, and this is some of the packages that they put together to send out for their group. So this is one of the fabrics that one of the followers has put together, and you can see that here she's chosen 2 fabrics that I would say kind of lend themselves to matchy-matchy. And if you put these together in your 9-patch, it's not that it won't work, but it's going to be a much more subtle 9-patch than if you chose a brighter, bolder fabric. So when she does this, those 9 patches and the strip sets are going to fall to the background, and what's really going to pop on her quilt is going to be the ducks, and it's probably what she wants. So you can see how she has put it together. She has designed her quilt so different colors of fabric will pick up different areas on her quilt. And in your pattern, there are pages that have the design layout there. I encourage you, if you're going to use that design layout, photocopy it, because once you've colored it in, you can't have it anymore. You can see here in this design, they intend to use a yellow and a gray and to pick that out. All right, let's take a look at the pattern a little more thoroughly, and we'll take a look at the things that I've chosen to do. We're just about wrapped up for time for this month. I started a few minutes late because we had some people have difficulty with logging in. So I'm going to go until about 10:55 Central Time. All right, let me stop that share and let me go back to what I'm going to use. Okay, again, I had this panel that was sent to me, and that fabric is from Rivers Bend, and I love it. It's a yummy, yummy fabric, but it let me remind you, it's not square. So I've decided that I'm going to add 1 border using the 9 patch, and then I'll decide if I want to come back out and add another black. What I chose for my fabrics are a gray that's similar. It's the same gray as what's right here in this fabric. And I chose the white that is in the background here. I did that very I have a hard time talking today. I did it very purposefully because I wanted to lighten it up as it headed out. To me, this black background and then the black border was a lot of dark. And so I laid the darks down. I didn't like them. I came back with the whites. I have put my 2 pieces together. Here's the blocks, the strips that I cut using the ruler. I put them together. I actually cut them together with right sides together, and I stitched. Okay, so again, check your 1/4 inch before you stitch. I made my stitches, and from those, I ended up I started out with a strip set of 2 fabrics, okay, and I decided I wanted the gray to be the cornerstone touching the black, so I'd have my color theme would go from black to gray to white. And I wanted the white here along the side to really make it pop and look different. I start out with this strip set of 2 fabrics, and then I add the fabric and finish out a strip set of 3, as she says in her pattern. She describes that pattern. Once I have that strip set of 3, on the ruler, there is a marking of where to cut your strip width. Now, if it is difficult for you to see that marking, or if you want to make sure you don't make the mistake of cutting on the stitching line, take a little piece of sticky note and cover up that stitching line so you only can see the cutting line. Now, you might ask me, why do I think that's important? Because the first time I did this, one of my strip sets, I cut on the stitching line, not on the cutting line. And so, you know, I kept it because I'll make some little tiny 9 patches with it, but it'll throw you off. You think you have everything ready to go, and you find out that one strip set is a 1/4 inch shorter than the rest, and it no longer works for you. So if that helps you, then go ahead and do that while you're cutting your strips, and then you can just take that piece off and go ahead and use your ruler like you normally would. Once you have it in your strip set of 3, you'll use your Marti tool and set it right on there and cut a square. The center of the Marti tool has lines on it that will line up with your seams to make sure that you're cutting that perfectly square. You really will never get a squarer 9 patch than what you can with using this tool. Okay? Once you have your strips, so I have a strip of the gray on the outside with white in the middle, and I need 2 of those for my block, and I have a strip with white on the outside and gray in the middle. Okay? Remember, we talked about pressing, press to the dark, or press to the light. It's whatever you choose to do that makes it, whichever one you want to go, just stay with that consistently. In this case, I pressed to the dark. Okay, made sure that each of those seams are pressed well. If you like to really work hard to match those seams up as you're stitching the other way, I like to use a fork pin by Clover. It pins on both sides of the seam, and it makes it so that those seams match up perfectly and they can't wiggle as I'm running them through my machine. And some of our quilters around here know I don't like to pin, so when I'm working with these small blocks, oftentimes I won't pin. Okay, when pressing, I really love to fan my seams and press them open. You can either press it to the outside and be consistent with that, or you can fan those seams and press them open. And by doing that, they will still line up perfectly with your sashing strips. And by fanning the seams and pressing them open, what I mean is normally that seam would look like this. And if you just take your finger and pinch it down, it will press and make this little fan. I'll try to get it nice and close. See if you can see that. It makes a little 4-patch look on the back. By doing that, that seam is perfectly flat. I don't have bulk on any side of it, and it makes it so that it sits flatter when I'm quilting. If I'm going to be quilting this with my domestic machine, it's a lot flatter seam than what I normally would get. All right, this was going to be easy for me. I'm going to just go ahead and sash and cornerstone it, maybe add one little border, a little tabletop. I think it'll be really cute. Other good uses of this particular pattern would be that when you have, we had this gifted to us to our Quilting Angels program, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it because they were odd size units. And so this is something perfect for the Marti Michelle. I can cut these blocks apart and I can stash them and cornerstone them with a 9-patch, and it should be good to go. Other things I plan to do with this particular pattern was I had this really yummy picnic fabric, and it has picnic tables and a bicycle with flowers and a barbecue and a picnic basket, and it's so cute. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was kind of large print. And then it dawned on me, I saw this pattern, it would be perfect for me to make a quilted picnic blanket using this and then using the 9-patch. Those are the things that I'm going to use. If as we are going along, you realize that you want some help with choosing fabrics or wanting someone to vote on whether or not they work, go ahead and take pictures with your cell phone and post them up to our Facebook page or our Instagram, and we'll be more than happy to help you out. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and open it up and see if anybody has any questions. Let's see. I can hear you in my earpiece now. Anybody have any questions? It was a lot to go over.
Are you going to be on every week now?
Okay, so Arlene asked, in case some of you couldn't hear, because some of you don't have your microphone turned on, Arlene asked if we're going to be on every week. I'm going to schedule once a month for sure that we're going to be on, and then I will follow up and have drop-in visits in between. So the once a month will always follow, it will always be on the first, I'm going to say the second Monday of the month. We are scheduled to do our 9-patch parade live. And we're choosing that date because Gnome Angel comes out with her initial instructions on the 1st of every month. So that allows us to listen to her instructions and then help move everybody along. What I plan to do is, as I finish a quilt or do something, I will send a shout out to everybody who's on our particular 9-patch parade quilt along and let you know what time and when I'm going to go online. And if it works for you to come online when I do that, great. And if it doesn't work for you to come online when I do that, just know that you'll have access to the video link at any time. My expectations would be, or my thoughts would be, that in the future, we'll have that time where people can show and tell some of the stuff that they've done with that just from being online. And if you don't have the way to grab a quilt and stick it up here in front of a camera like this, take a picture of it with your phone, and you can either email it to me or Facebook message it to me, and I'll share it for you. So oftentimes what I'll be doing with my online pieces after my first one that's a regularly scheduled one is I will jump in, and as I discover something new or as somebody tells me something new, I will jump in and shoot a little video related to that. That way everybody has that information. This particular quilt, this first one, is a really simple quilt to follow. So even if with that picnic fabric, if I chose just to make great big blocks, I certainly can. Or if I have a panel, like I loved this panel because it has such sweet things. This one says, let's see if you can see it. No matter what, choose to bloom. So this would be, I put this one into a door hanger, but you will notice, once again, the blocks are not the same size. Not only do I have a small block and a big block, but even on my big block, the length and the width are not the same. So I'm going to be like Cindy, and I'm going to kind of fussy them around so that they work out well. So I think that's the fun of doing this, is we'll get to show different ideas, and it will help us to say, oh yeah, I could do that. And maybe there's something that you have in your stash that you can now pull out and actually use. Because I've had this fabric for a long, long time. And I've got that embroidered piece that my aunt did for a very long time. So I just am happy that I finally now have a pattern or a design that I can use that'll make all that go together.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Arlene. Thank you for asking. Any other questions? All righty. Well, that's all I have for this week. And now I need to get down and get busy and start sewing. So do you. Get out that stash and start cutting up. Remember, it doesn't all have to be just 2 colors of stashing. You'll be able to go back to this video or go online to Quilt Angel on their Instagram and see some of those drawings where they're using multiple colors in the same quilt. I think that'll be fun too. It's made me really think that maybe that's what I should do with that picnic quilt. Maybe I should make an alternative design by sashing some of that differently. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. It's cold and chilly here in Iowa, but the sun is shining and it's supposed to be nice by the end of the day. So from here at Stitch and Tree to you, I thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.